Okay, here we go. Okay, we've got a live stream, different room this time. We'll see how it goes. Don't know what to expect of this. As always, if you're logging in, I'm just doing some dishes here, so multitasking. But if you're logging in, welcome to my channel. Please leave a question, response, something you'd like to talk about. That's how we'll get this going. I'm not going to do a running commentary until people log in, otherwise I'm just talking to myself. It's kind of pointless. Hopefully the Wi-Fi will not mess around. It has been doing so recently. We'll see. Guess anyone who's online will be online. Let's see. I've got one thumbs up. Thank you, whoever has left that. Sometimes there may be a little bit of a time lapse, so if you've left a comment and it isn't immediately appearing, that may be the reason why. I think there's about a 10-second time lapse. Good evening, Aaron. Welcome. How are you? I'm doing this in a slightly different context this evening. I'm in my on my first floor of my house doing the dishes. So not that I need to actually type anyway, but that's just for context. So we'll see if a few more people drop by and see if we can get some topics going. By the way, just for the record, if this is in replay, if the video gets cut off, it's my Wi-Fi, so that'll be the reason. It's been going up and down recently, but it's just been a little while since I've done a live stream, so thought it was about time. So we'll see if anyone else drops by. See if we can get something going here. I'm all right. Thankfully, I did my washing up this morning. I don't do it on this floor as much as I should. This is kind of I have my utility room downstairs, which is for everyday washing up. This is more for pots and pans, which honestly I'm quite lazy about. I don't actually mind it. It's actually, I don't find it tedious. It's just that I don't use this floor as much. And I've got a dishwasher, but obviously it's all energy. So some things, of course, cannot go in the dishwasher. I have some bone china, that sort of thing, can't go in the dishwasher. Or collectible mugs. So, Aaron, if you want to raise any subject, that's fine. Hopefully some more people will drop by. We can discuss it. I've got another thumbs up there, so we'll see who someone else is around. I mean, there's no ideal really with these live streams, but the more the merrier, obviously. Some stubborn stains here. Right, four viewers, so please stay by, people. If any of you want to bring up anything in any of my videos, feel free to do so. If you want to bring up anything else, that's how we'll get this going. I watched Murder on the Orient Express last night, 2017. Don't know if you've seen that. What did I make of the budget? Honestly, Aaron, I haven't seen the news today. I haven't followed it closely. I've had to go out to get groceries, so I do think that Hunt isn't going to make the same mistakes as Kwasi Kwarteng. Apparently, households will be getting support, but honestly, I haven't seen enough of the details to comment at great length. So, at the moment, I have no strong views on it. How about yourself? What do you think? I mean, obviously, Labour's attacking it, but that's you would expect that. So, I don't know. I know that in real terms, some people will actually be worse off, even though it's on paper a raise. But I don't know. I will say this: Chancellor of the Exchequer must be one of the most unenviable jobs in politics. I think it's actually harder than the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is like the captain of the ship, but a Chancellor is almost like an engineer. I mean, basically, what's on your desk, a £3 trillion economy, and you have to allocate that. I'm not saying chancellors don't make serious mistakes, but it's I do think it's one of the hardest jobs in politics because they're always going to be criticised by some segment. But Hunt's a senior politician; he's experienced, so I don't know. Ray, hi Nathan. What do you think people saying Britain is a racist country? I don't think Britain is racist. Yeah, I mean, the thing about these sort of blanket statements, Britain is a racist country, it's absurd because a country, the thing about any country is you're going to have racists, of course you are, but I definitely would resent that sort of smear on this nation. I think we've come a long way. I think we'll have to be honest. In the past, there probably was significant pockets of, not even pockets, I think racism was quite mainstream. If we look at the 70s, for example, sort of things that people, the sort of attitudes a lot of people had, we have moved on from that. But I resent this notion that we're a racist country. Of course we're not. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that we don't have a racism problem. I've personally seen it. I've seen ignorant people shout out racist slurs against minorities, and of course, white people can also be victims of racism. It's happened in this country. The left sort of in denial about that, but it does happen. But looking around the world, I would say actually some of the least tolerant countries are some of those who do the loudest complaining when it comes to racism in Western countries. I'll give an example. India. No disrespect to any Indian viewers, but I don't think there are any at the moment. But when, for example, an Indian student's a victim of racism in a Western country, India gets into arms about it. But a Reader's Digest survey a few years ago found that they surveyed like 10 different countries, like well-known countries, and apparently the country which people would least like to have a neighbor of another ethnic group was India. So whereas Western countries, it was almost like 90% that people would be fine with that. So I actually think Western countries are the most tolerant. But that doesn't mean that we don't have racist components. And it's a very ugly thing. I've seen some very ignorant people recently. Sorry, Aaron, I'll get back to your comment in a second. But recently, I was sort of at a public, kind of a magic show type thing. The guy was from Australia, but there were some people in the crowd from the Philippines, I guess. And just this drunk yob came by and was mouthing off, and so we do have it. We do have ignorant people in our society. I don't think we should pretend otherwise, but I don't think the problem's what it once was, and we're definitely not a racist country. As a Tory voter, I'm not that impressed, especially with the fuel tax rise, which wasn't mentioned by Hunt, but was in the OBER report. The fuel tax comes force in March and price will go up by 12p. Yeah, like I say, Aaron, I really haven't looked at it in detail, so I don't want to say too much because I just don't have the material to talk about it. It's important, of course. One thing I would like to see is at some point the trajectory changing on these on the cost of living. I mean, every time I go out, something has risen. even in a cheap store like Home Bargains, where I get a lot of stuff. It's like, for example, a tin of mackerels, skinless and boneless mackerels, usually 99 pence. It's now £1.09. And it's just like, these may seem like small increases, but I'm not exactly financially stable. It's concerning. It is concerning. So I don't think there's any magic wand to fix that. And I do think Ukraine is a big factor, Putin's war in Ukraine. But I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is, but I just hope that it subsides sooner rather than later. I mean, it's unlikely that we'll see prices go down again, but as long as they don't keep going up. The fuel thing, I don't drive, so I'm not. That doesn't really affect me personally. Well, of course, fuel can cover a lot of areas. So, do you drive, Aaron? What's Hunt said about that? What's his justification for it? Comes in force in March and price will go up by 12 pence. 12 pence on the pound, I guess that is. It adds up. Of course, this isn't the first time this country's had issues with. In the early 70s, of course, there was the oil crisis in the Middle East, 1973. That had ripple effects here as well. There was an episode of The Crown sort of dramatised this in the Heath government when there was even a cabinet meeting by candlelight. Things had got that bad. Undertakers refusing to bury bodies and so on. Don't think we're quite there yet, but it's a tough time, I think. So we've got 5 viewers now. Anyone else, feel free to leave a comment. Feel free to ask me anything about, maybe you've seen one of my videos, you want to clarify something I've said, maybe you want to challenge something I've said, maybe you want to agree with something I've said. Welcome, Declan. I feel the Tory government are getting more arrogant too with the poorest people. Benefit sanctions are getting much harsher, as much stricter with job search. Yeah, I haven't signed on for a long time, but this is one thing that's always galled me about the Tories. They talk about, well, we need to reward strivers, and they've always been divisive in this area. But the problem I have is, often claimants are punished for things beyond their control. For example, and I know this from my sister's experience, she had a meeting with the job centre. So they set a time, it was a phone meeting. She sat by, and she has fibromyalgia, which is very painful. And it causes sleep problems as well. She's got other conditions. But anyway, she stood by, and they just didn't call. Administrative error. They did call about an hour and a half later. No apology, even though it was their fault. And she was actually accused of missing her appointment, even though she was absolutely blameless. Or liberal with sanctions. Okay, guys, it's saying my connection's unstable, so hopefully this won't conk out. Let's see. I don't, but a lot of my family do. Hunt said that it hasn't been decided yet, but the OBR would have mentioned it if the Treasury hadn't factored it in. Hi, Nathan. What do you think of Albanians get put up in 5-star hotels? I believe we should look after our own people first before we help any other countries. Well, I wouldn't put it that simply. I think we do have an obligation to help developing nations because we are one of the biggest economies in the world. So I don't think it's an either or situation. However, I do understand your concerns. I get, especially with Albanians. I mean, Albania is not a war zone. So there's really no reason why Albanians should be coming to this country. They're economic migrants. They're not political refugees. They're not fleeing a war zone. So I do agree with you there. And frankly, Albania's got issues with organized crime. I've only known one Albanian in my life, and I didn't like the guy. But that's, I wouldn't, of course, vilify a whole country. But he was just a shifty character. I was dating a Romanian girl at the time, and we were kind of in a love triangle. He liked her as well, and he was just a shifty character. all around. But basically, hi, welcome, Toxic Holy Grenade. Yeah, but I totally agree, Ray. There's no reason they should be in 5-star hotels. But I wouldn't go so far as to say we shouldn't help other countries, period. I mean, I wouldn't say that, because let's say, for example, there's a devastating earthquake or typhoon. Of course, we have a moral obligation to help. But I do agree that we have to, the whole thing with immigration vetting is not racist. We do have a right to protect our borders. That's a fundamental issue about security. And we simply cannot have this endless tide of people coming in. It should be said, though, the UK isn't necessarily, for example, Turkey has far, far more refugees than we do. But then again, a lot of these people are economic migrants, they're not refugees. So this is something that definitely, I think, relies a lot on good Anglo-French relations. So definitely Britain and France have a vested interest in sorting this out. Let's see. I once saw a map of the world that coloured countries on the racial attitudes, with the most tolerant in the shade of blue to the most intolerant in shades of red. India and China were dark red. I'm not at all surprised. India especially, I mean, if you look at the caste system within Hinduism, they deny it, but it still exists. And it is, I mean, the racism in those countries, you know, if that happened in the West, there'd be rallies on the streets. In the case of China, having been there, I think sometimes it's more ignorance than like callousness. That's not an excuse, but I think sometimes it's just because it's pretty homogenous. I remember I spoke to a Japanese girl on a dating site that I was on, and she freely admitted, if you come to Japan, it will be very racist. Now, I'm a white guy. So if they're funny about white people, you can imagine what it would be like for a black person or a darker skinned person. And it's the thing about those countries, it's not this sort of naked racism necessarily. They wouldn't attack someone physically, especially not in Japan, but it would be quite a cold thing. This is what I've heard. Or, for example, you'd be on a subway train, and if you're black, people will kind of stare at you or avoid you and stuff like this. This is especially in Japan and South Korea, where they're very, very homogenous societies. China is actually more diverse in terms of its own ethnic makeup, but yeah, on question, I'm not surprised by that. I think India is at the very top in the Reader's Digest study I saw. Not sure where African countries rank. They're going to have internal issues, but it isn't at all surprising that the most tolerant countries are Western. Canada, United States, Britain. I mean, people say the US is racist. It has a racist history. It has racism problems. But the very fact that a mixed race man, an African American, could become president shows how far the US has come. You know, and Obama was voted in by millions of people. So I do find it a little bit galling when people in countries like that whine about racism in the West, because they would do well to look at what happens in their own countries. Let's see. The UK and US were dark blue. I was quite amused that France was a shade of pink color. I'd say France is more racist than Britain overall, because some of the things that pass as humour in France would be very on PC in Britain today. And it is significant, you know, Rishi Sunak is our prime minister, as I think it was Douglas Murray pointed out. It's hard to imagine France or Germany or Italy having an ethnic minority leader anytime soon. Germany, I think, before France and Italy. But Italy, yeah, I definitely don't see that happening anytime soon. I actually think Britain is one of the most tolerant countries in the world. And I'm not just saying that as a matter of patriotic defensiveness. I really believe we are. We have our share of bigots, and there's plenty of idiots out there, but I honestly think overall we're a tolerant country. Good to be back. Speaking of the US, I have heard and seeing a lot going on, like Marjorie getting confronted on her antics, among other things. Marjorie is just as bad as Donald Trump. Yeah, can't stand her. Horrible woman. I mean, she's just. What troubles me is that someone that ignorant and that inflammatory can be an elected representative. By the way, guys, I just want to reiterate, if I suddenly get cut off, it's the Wi-Fi, and I probably won't restart this because my hands are full. So apologies in advance if that happens. But I think Marjorie Taylor Greene did win her seat, unfortunately. It was close, but I think she did win it. When you say she was confronted, do you mean by journalists or protesters or what? One thing's for sure, it wasn't the red wave that the Trump people were saying it would be. But the Democrats shouldn't be complacent either. America is a very, very divided country right now. Arguably more so than ever before. On the issue of American politics, I see Nancy Pelosi stepped down. But she is 82, and I think that trip to Taiwan, which was a little bit renegade, was kind of a last hurrah. Pelosi will be, I think, one of the better remembered speakers. First woman, of course, but she was controversial at times. She could be quite a left-wing demagogue herself, but I think definitely she made a mark in history. But yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene, such a... Incidentally, talking of demagogues, Katie Hopkins apparently has been spouting off pro-Putin commentary. She's her very own... these people are just deranged, in my opinion. I mean, just so detached from reality. It's not even about left and right. Excuse me. It's just about... Anyway, Ray. Hi, Nathan. You know, when men get rejected by women, you think it's frowned upon when men are single by society? That's a good question. I'll come back to that. Have you heard that our king got egged? Well, I heard some idiot tried to egg him, but Charles, you know, in his typical calm demeanor, just walked on. I think the egg missed him and it was on the ground and he just kind of walked around it. My mum said that the security woman nearby didn't do a very good job. But another thing about the king, he's just given all palace staff a £600 bonus. So I think it's his way of showing that he's in touch. And he gets it. This is a time of struggle, and he wants the coronation to be watered down. I've mixed views on that. I get the optics. He doesn't want to give the impression it's this really lavish ceremony when people are struggling. But at the same time, it's tradition, it's history. I wouldn't necessarily like to see it watered down too much. I mean, in 1953, people welcomed the coronation precisely because it was a distraction from the age of austerity as it then was. Ray, to answer your question, on some level, yeah. I mean, there's a lot in that question. Does society look down on single men? I'm 37. I'm single. I've never had anyone personally insult me, well, except for online trolls. But in real life, I don't. I mean, I'll be honest. I've got neighbors who are around my age. They're married. They've got children. I won't lie. There's times that I do think about it. I do think, is there some, why am I at this point in life? But when men get rejected by women, I'll say this about online dating. I think it's harder for men. And the reason I say that is because I think men have to make more effort. It's men who are expected to make the first move. So, you could probably, if you're on an online dating site, you could send 10 messages to different women. You might get one response. Now, women might say, well, it's because we get lots of sleazy, creepy messages, but you get people who just want sincere communication and still get ignored. So I do think, I'm not saying the women don't also get lonely, but I do think men have to make more of an effort on dating sites because they're expected to make the first move. And then I came across a woman the other day and she actually said, okay, leave me a long and thoughtful message. And I'm thinking, well, okay, you're quite cute. I might just do that, but what are you offering in return? You're expecting guys to invest time to impress you, but will you respond to them? Will you give them time? So that's what I was thinking. I haven't messaged her yet, but I'm sort of thinking like, well, yeah, she's quite cute. I quite like her personality right up, but yeah, it's a good question, Ray. I mean, I just want to think of more to say about this because it's a good question. I guess it depends on the context of why they're rejected. If the woman has a boyfriend already, I've been rejected for different reasons. I've also had relationships, and incidentally, I've had to reject myself. I've rejected women, not because there was anything particularly wrong with them. In one case, I quite liked her. She was quite attractive, but I was simply getting closer to another member at the time, and I thought it would be unfair on her. I thought it would be misleading her to keep talking to her and getting her hopes up. So I rejected her for that reason. The other thing is she was being funny about having a video chat, which to me is a question of authenticity. And the fact she wasn't willing to do that or was reluctant about it, I was a bit iffy about. So that's why I rejected her. But in terms of like, it would just depend on the circumstances. And if she's a good person, she'll reject the guy in a civil way. She won't just be cold about it. So I think context really matters. But in terms of does society look down on single men, I don't know. I think we can overthink that. I personally haven't had any sort of insults directly. So I'm not sure how true that is. But I do think definitely it's more of a challenge for men with online dating. I think men have to make more of an effort. If I would choose to go to either China or Japan, I will pick Japan. I will need to learn the language. I like the good culture they have as well as anime and manga. Yeah, I mean, the thing about I haven't been to Japan and I like Japan. I get a good vibe from it overall, but just regarding what I said earlier, I do think they have a very internalized mindset. I mean, they have this interest in Western culture. They do, but when I was speaking to the Japanese woman on the dating site, she openly said, if you come to Japan, you'll experience racism. They're not always that honest, but she basically said it. I said, well, thanks for being honest. The other thing is I saw a job advertisement for Japan the other day, and it was like they were very big on, you will show a respect for our culture. Well, Western countries don't seem to have that sort of condition, So I overall I get a good vibe from Japan. I think it's a good country. They've the very low crime rates. They've some beautiful aspects of the culture, some less savory things too. I'm not a big fan of the way they have their death penalty, whereby the condemned is just brought out without warning and executed. I mean, I'm conservative on crime, but that seems a bit iffy. There was a guy who was actually on death row in Japan for years, and it turned out he was innocent. So even in a country like Japan, which has a very efficient system in terms of the very top police work, mistakes can be made. But yeah, overall, I've got a good vibe from Japan. I would say this though, for all the communist side of China, the Chinese are good hosts, and they do have this down to earth way about them, which you might not find so much in Japan or South Korea. One thing I've heard about Japan, which is maybe more negative, is that it's this kind of, they're very polite, but you never quite know how sincere that is. The Chinese have a reputation for being quite rude, and they have some very bad manners, like spitting in the street and so on. However, they can be quite down to earth. It's hard to explain, but having been there, there is a certain informality about Chinese culture, which I like, which actually makes it quite easy to adapt to, politics aside. Declan, I'm just glad my case is finally over and both got custodial sentences. Absolutely. I mean, it's good that they did because, honestly, Declan, there would have been a point not so long ago where they would have got a tap on the wrist. So maybe for everything I say about our justice system, maybe some sentencing is improving. Having said that, I read this week about a guy who was high on cocaine and alcohol, going in the wrong direction, and he killed someone. This guy had already done prison time for dangerous driving in 2006, presumably been released. And the bit that gets me is when you get someone like that, drink driving, high on drugs, wrong direction, he gets a driving ban for 8 years. 8 years. Someone like that should never, ever be allowed behind the wheel again, ever. It just defies, I don't get it. So there's areas like that that definitely our justice system still way too soft. I don't know if you guys have seen, but the televised trials, that is to say, when the judge actually reads out the verdict, they don't televise the whole thing, but it's interesting. I welcome it because I think it's more transparent. And it's not like American style, turning legal proceedings into a circus. It's because I've been watching the testimony of the relatives of the Parkland shooting. It's the trial of Nicholas Cruz, the mass shooter in that case. And I don't think we'll see that in the UK, that sort of televised justice, but I do welcome more transparency because it shows how judges reach the decision. I still strongly disagree with some of the decisions, but it's a welcome thing just to have more transparency. Because I do think for most people, judges are distant figures. By the way, Declan, how was the judge in your case? Did you find they were quite empathetic or like a bureaucrat? What did you think about the judge? Yeah, definitely. I actually, I've had a lot of back and forth with the Ministry of Justice, the Sentencing Council and so on, and they claim that sentencing on average has got a few months longer. Whoopie-doo, So apparently it's went from an average of 8 months to an average of 13 months or something like that. I don't know what the exact figures were, but it has increased slightly on average. But it's, when you get a crime as heinous as a repeat offender who, that thing about the reckless driving really bugs me. Another one is youth crime. I mean, young offenders get a tap on the wrist. When you have teenage gangs terrorizing society, it's not good enough to say, oh, well, put them on community service. They literally laugh at that. And it's disgusting that you see people being, there was a pensioner in Birmingham and this youth gang kept tormenting him, ringing on his bell, just constantly. So I do think we need much tougher penalties with youth crime. I'd even favour a sort of national service, but tailored for that. I'm not talking about across the board because I can see problems with a general national service. It takes out a big chunk of someone's life, but tailored specifically for young offenders, I could see some merit in it. Maybe we should seriously look at it. I don't know. Like anything, there'll be pros and cons, but it's unacceptable that people are terrorized by louts in this country and they cannot be reassured that they will get justice because of legal bureaucracy. It's a disgrace. But anyway, in your case, Declan, at least it was a custodial sentence, so that's something. By the way, did they also get a restraining order so that, because I know you were concerned about that? I wasn't there, to be honest, kind of wanted to avoid it. I don't blame you. I not seen my attackers again, but seemed decent judging by sentencing. With the Nicholas Cruz sentencing, the one thing I didn't like was how the judge didn't intervene when the victim's relatives verbally attacked the defense lawyers for doing the job. My understanding of that, Aaron, was that the defense lawyers had insulted the victim's relatives. I mean, yeah, but apparently there was serious restrictions put on the relatives. I mean, what you saw presumably was the same as what I saw, was the relatives having their say. But apparently they were actually told they could not show emotions during the trial. Now, these are people who saw their children blasted away by a gunman, a young gunman, but a gunman nonetheless. So I think it's important to look at that in context. I know what you're saying. The defense lawyers were just doing their jobs, but apparently they weren't innocent. I mean, they had actually insulted the relatives as well. So if that's true, I haven't seen the whole proceedings, but if that's true, I don't I don't blame the relatives for being angry with them, because I don't think it's a case of you're defending our son, our daughter's killers, so that's why we're against you. I think the relatives were angry at the way they'd gone about it. That's different from just defending the gunman as a matter of due process and because he has a right to legal counsel. I think it's the way these defense lawyers have went about it. I mean, if I was defending someone like Nicholas Cruz, I would say show remorse, admit what you've done, and we'll try to get the best we can. But I think the way the defense lawyers went about it, that was the issue, rather than, they're just attacking them because of what they're doing. That's my understanding anyway. I could be wrong. But if you listen to what the relatives were saying, one of the fathers said, Mr. whatever his name was, one of the lawyers, you said this, you said that. So they were talking about specifics. So I'm just finding all the stuff to watch here. I mean, you have to understand these people have been through the worst of the worst. So people aren't robots. They're not going to, if they have an opportunity to confront the lawyers, then they're going to do so. Bear in mind, up to now the lawyers have had all the say. The relatives haven't been able to have the voice up until this point. They've literally had to stay quiet. So I respectfully disagree with that. I think the judge was right to not interrupt them, because think about it. If they're saying, these are raw emotions, and the judge is just, oh no, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. They have to be allowed to express how they feel. Absolutely. As long as they're not saying anything that would necessarily jeopardize due process, then I think basically, and they're not actually threatening the lawyers, then I think they should be allowed to do it. I mean, a lot of people were praising that judge for allowing them the freedom to do that. Only that the female got more lenient sentence. She had more charges on her, including other attempted robbery as well as robbery and destroying property. Yeah, I mean, that's what I don't get. If she has a previous record, why the hell wouldn't that be an aggravating factor? But you did mention he was the one who actually physically assaulted you, so that might be the only reason she got a more lenient sentence. On the progressive side of things, there's probability is a probability that in different countries with different languages, some born in them might also have difficulty learning them. That's why English can provide us learning. Sorry, I need to read that again, Toxic. On the progressive side of things, there is a probability that in different countries with different languages, some born in them might also have difficulty learning them. That's why English can provide as a safety net if they have a hard time learning a foreign language. So you mean English is the international language, obviously, so it serves that purpose. That's why I think it's so utilized around the world. I think I've understood you correctly. Apologies if I haven't. No worries. So, guys, I might wrap this up quite soon, but because I'll be doing some more work in the kitchen, it might require full concentration. But let's say another 5 minutes or so. I'm washing my cafetiere coffee thingy. I've had this for about 13 years, but it's a good little device. Sorry for the noise, that's just temporary. I'm just running the tap. I don't know if any of you guys watch The Crown at all on Netflix. Well, I'm pretty into it, and I've just started the 5th series, so I don't want to give it away any spoilers. But do any of you watch that? This new series, and this isn't giving away too many spoilers, there is controversy because of its treatment of the Charles and Diana story. But the thing is, I think it's hard to avoid. I know John Major and Tony Blair have also criticised the fact that they've implied some of the details of their conversations with the Queen. But I think people know it's a fictional series, based on events. Johnny Lee Miller of Trainspotting fame plays John Major, and he looks the part, but I don't think he's got the voice quite right. But it's vitally important to note that I am only calling it non-existent in the sense that it's in association with morality. In terms of morality, neutrality doesn't exist. I will concede that neutrality exists in the sense of not partaking in conflicts, conundrums, as well as good versus evil conflicts. Ray, hi Nathan, The Crown you mentioned is a true story. Well, The Crown, the series, is about the royal family and the history of the royal family, so certainly a big chunk of it is based on real events. But there is some artistic license. If you have Netflix and you haven't seen it and you're interested in the history, it is a superb series. I mean, the sets, the attention put into the sets, each episode is like a mini film. If you see it, you'll see it's much, much more than just a period drama. It really, really does show the latter half of 20th century British history. Let's see. Yeah, in terms of morality, I agree. Absolute neutrality often doesn't exist, especially with something like Ukraine. I've watched the first 3 series of The Crown, which I enjoyed, but I've yet to see 4 and 5. So 4, I'm not going to give too much away here, Aaron, but 4 gets into the 1980s, Charles and Diana. But not just that, Thatcherism, of course, and other things. Covers the Falklands, it covers a lot of other areas. And Series 5, I've just started. It's up to the 1990s. I think my dad was put off The Crown at that point because he prefers the older history, but it's not. It's done in such a way, as you'll know if you've seen the first 3 series. There's some backtracking, so it's so far I'm impressed. I mean, people always will question new cast. So, for example, Imelda Staunton is now playing the Queen. She hasn't had that much screen time so far, but they've done this with Olivia Colman. When she took on the role, they said, "Oh, she's not Claire Foy." Well, of course she's not. She's playing the middle-aged Queen. Claire Foy was the young Queen, so of course you're going to have a different actress. I honestly think the cast is superb so far. Like I said, Johnny Lee Miller in this new series, he looks the part. He hasn't quite got the voice right, because John Major has quite a distinctive voice, and Johnny Lee Miller just sounds like himself. So that's the only thing he hasn't quite got right. Dominic West plays Charles. Elizabeth Debicki, I'm not sure how her name is pronounced, plays Diana. Real life judges may be neutral in the sense that they're not taking sides in a conflict or anything, but morality-wise, their morality is either evil for the corrupt ones, while the more reasonable ones are good. Well, there's definitely corrupt judges, no question about that. There was a guy in outside of Wales or the south of England, and a young girl had been raped, and he actually victim blamed. He actually said, well, the young lady may have been provocative in the way she dressed, and there was obviously an outcry, calls for him to be sacked, and he apologized. But I do think that there needs to be a lot more scrutiny of judges, because at the moment, the only way they can be removed is professional misconduct. That is, for example, if they're having a fling with a juror. But lenient sentencing, I mean, if you have a judge who's consistently lenient, the only way the public can hold them to account is by writing to the Attorney General. And that's just good luck getting anything done with that. Very, very, very once in a blue moon a sentence will be increased, but it's rare. So the system needs to be a lot more, frankly, simple in terms of holding lenient judges to account. I mean, at the moment, they don't have email addresses. It's not like an MP. If you don't like your MP, you don't agree with them, you can either vote them out of office, you can write them a strongly worded letter, you can go to their surgery. With judges, no, there's no contact details except for the address of the court. So that's one of my issues with British judges. They're distant figures. Their American counterparts, I'm not saying they don't get it wrong as well, but at least they're more public figures, therefore more subject to scrutiny. And I think anyone in a position of power should be subject to scrutiny, whether politicians, business people, judges, you name it. So the system definitely, some improvements have been made. For example, victims now have more say in parole hearings. There's more transparency in the verdicts. They're being televised, but there's so much more to be done. I think I would like to see the Sentencing Council at least partly elected, something akin to the police commissioners, whereby the head of the Sentencing Council is elected. Not all of them, but at least the head. And then they can pitch their case, just like police commissioners do. I'm like your dad, as I'm fascinated by British politics from the 50s until the 70s. I did my uni dissertation on the Profumo affair. So you would have liked the episode of The Crown which covered that. The guy they had playing Harold Macmillan was very good at the role. Yeah, Profumo, I'm sure they'd done a dramatisation on that a few years ago with Mandy Rice Davies and Christine Keeler. Very interesting time in British politics, because we were just coming out of that era of austerity, starting to get into the swinging 60s, and I think it was an interesting time. There's a show called Judge Judy. What's your thoughts on it? Yeah, the little I've seen on that, I mean, when I call for more transparency, I don't necessarily mean reality TV type transparency. My thing with Judge Judy is a little bit sensationalistic. I don't know. I think sometimes I want judges to be tougher, but I don't necessarily want them to play to the cameras either. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't watch your show, so perhaps I can't comment too much, but I'm a little bit cynical because it just strikes me as sensationalizing the serious issues of justice. Hi, Nathan. I never know why judges give perpetrators a suspended sentence for mugging elderly people, assaulting strangers. The perpetrator should get a custodial sentence. Absolutely, Ray. Totally agree. I think suspended sentences are way overused. It's dishonest. I mean, we sentence this person to 4 years, but that's suspended. Well, then why give them the sentence? That sort of thing infuriates people, and the legal establishment don't seem to grasp public anger on this. Alex, welcome. And the Sentencing Council, if you look at the website, it's quite condescending. Like, if this whole section on sentencing myths and, well, we know best. But they need to start listening to public opinion. I mean, they talk about doing consultation. So I filled in one of their consultations recently. It took an hour, but it was all based on the wording, just the wording of legislation. And they said it won't actually make any difference to sentencing itself. It was purely about the wording. I filled it in as best I could, but I'm thinking, well, this isn't really public consultation. Public consultation will be saying, what do you think of this sentence? Is this too long? Is this too short? I'd like to see a lot more of that. And I'm not saying that sentencing should be determined solely by the public, but I do think there should be a greater public influence or say. That should be democracy. I mean, that to me is, there has to be a democratic mandate there. And the fact of the matter is, almost everyone believes there should be tougher sentencing in this country. Yeah, it was called The Trial of Christian Keeler in either late 2019 or early 20. I didn't watch all of it, actually. I enjoyed it, but it did repeat popular myths about the whole scandal, such as Keeler sleeping with Ivanov. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very famous. I'm sure it's been dramatized before. The Crown's take on it, if you recall, was that there was a mystery man in one of the photographs of that gentleman's club that was involved in the scandal, and it's speculated that was Prince Philip, this mystery man, but never proven. I do think Philip had a very colourful life, so it's plausible. Plausible. I think I'm almost done now. Well, as you can see, my hands are getting wrinkles, so I've done a good bit. So, guys, I'm going to have dinner soon, but this has been a good live stream. Thanks all for your participation, and I'm pleased it's been quite smooth. No, because my Wi-Fi has been playing up recently. So, I mean, it's been terrible weather here in Sunderland. Okay, thank you, Toxic. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys, I'm going to round this up as I need to use both hands and a few other things to do. But thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for dropping by, and I'll do this again. Thank you. Have a good evening, guys. Sorry, Alex, I know you've just come by, but I need to use both hands. Take care, everyone.